Good morning, everyone. Your morning weather briefing for this June 21st. I believe that there are no major changes in the forecast today versus what I presented yesterday. Looking at my temperature and rainfall outlooks this morning, still some mild temperatures in the near term, but we are still looking at quite a bit of warmth returning to the forecast for around June 27th, and that'll continue right through the opening days of July. I will admit that if my 11 to 15 day temperature forecast is wrong, it is going to cool. Could very well be some much above normal temperatures in the 11 to 15 day period. Still some rainfall chances right through the 6 to 10 day time frame and probably into at least early portions of the 11 to 15 day period as well. QPF discussion for the 1 to 5 day time frame. Once again this morning I'm not going to have any major disagreements with this forecast. I note that a lot of the rain that is shown there in the Corn Belt is going to be in the eastern Corn Belt for today, and then a lot of the rain in the western Corn Belt is not going to be occurring until very late in this period. A lot of the rain that is shown in Kansas there will be occurring for a later Sunday and into Sunday night. For the day 6 to 7 time frame, still some more rainfall in this period in the Corn Belt. A lot of that rain going to be falling on Tuesday. This will be marking the start of a drier period in the Plain States. Afternoon high temperatures yesterday. The heat that we have seen in recent days is continuing to be pared back across a big portion of the nation's midsection. Only a pocket of 90 plus degree temperatures yesterday afternoon in southern portion of the Corn Belt, and you saw that in northern portion of the Corn Belt, clouds and rainfall kept high temperatures there in the afternoon hours just in the 60s. Have seen some significant and locally heavy amounts of rainfall during the last 24 hours across a big portion of the nation's midsection. No more was that the case than in northwestern Iowa and some nearby areas where 2 to 4 inch rainfall amounts and locally even heavier than that have been very common. I do have a report of over 5 inches of rainfall during the last 24 hours in Laverne, Minnesota, which is in the far southwestern portion of the state. You can see those bigger rains in northwestern Iowa and nearby areas indicated by radar estimated rainfall since 7 o'clock yesterday morning. Also some significant and extensive rains the last 24 hours in the center of the Corn Belt, right along the Mississippi River. Have seen rains returning to the mid-south over the last 24 hours as well after that area had an extended period of mostly dry weather. Looking at rainfall over the last 2 weeks, if you consider that anything in yellow on this map would indicate areas that have had more than 2.5 inches of rainfall, we're now to a point where you're getting into very small portions of the Corn Belt that have not seen some very significant rainfall over the last 2 weeks. At the same time, if you look at areas that are in red on that map, would indicate areas that have had more than 6 inches of rainfall during the last 2 weeks. We're also now to the point where a pretty sizable portion of the Corn Belt is getting more rain than they can really deal with right now. Looking at the radar here early on this morning, you can see pretty distinctively that we have quite a spin in the radar look this morning. All of the rainfall revolving quite nicely around an upper level low pressure system that is located in the center of the Corn Belt this morning. Again, we are looking at most of the rainfall during the next 24 hours to be moving into eastern portion of the Corn Belt as the upper level low pressure system continues to slide eastward. You can still see that there are looking at a slight potential of excessive rainfall, creating some flash flooding situations in portion of the eastern Corn Belt today. There are some flash flood watches in effect right now for northern Illinois and nearby areas. Again, that rainfall mainly impacting the eastern Corn Belt for today. Probably not going to be seeing a whole lot of rainfall in the Corn Belt for tomorrow and into a decent portion of the weekend, but once again, significant rain moving back into the far western Corn Belt by Sunday night and into the Monday, Tuesday timeframe of next week, and that's all in association with once again another very significant trough of low pressure aloft, and that's where it's going to be located at 7 o'clock in the morning on Monday. And as that system moves eastward, we are looking at additional significant rain across especially the central and western Corn Belt for Monday and Tuesday, and then into the eastern Corn Belt on a weaker fashion as we get towards Wednesday. That will not end the rainfall chances for next week, though, as we get in towards the latter portion of next week as more heat tries to return to the Corn Belt at that time. It'll be back into a ring of fire situation, and this is looking at surface features as of 1 o'clock in the morning on June 29th. You can see that we are looking at heat returning to that time to the southern plains and into the southwestern Corn Belt, but over top of that heat, you can see that both the European model and the GFS model are suggesting significant ring of fire rains once again in the Corn Belt by around sometime next Thursday night. Can't believe the details of either of those models, but they at least are both in agreement that we would likely see a return to a ring of fire setup in the Corn Belt for middle and especially latter portions of the 6 to 10 day time frame. So combining the rains that we're going to be seeing in the near term with those rains that are going to be seen for middle and latter portion of the 6 to 10 day time frame, we are still looking at a very wet 10-day forecast for the Corn Belt. You can see that all of the models are in good agreement that extensive, significant, and locally heavy additional rains are going to be seen during the next 10 days all across the Corn Belt region. So again, emphasizing still no shortages of rainfall chances for at least the next 10 days across the Corn Belt. Probably a situation where some portion of the Corn Belt sees rain on every day in that period, and on a lot of those days that rainfall will be significant in nature. Looking at the temperature forecast, still looking at mild or even cool conditions across a big portion of the nation's midsection for today through very early portion of next week. Looking at temperature anomalies for tomorrow, you can see that most of the Corn Belt in below normal temperatures by that time, even a pocket of much below normal readings in the far western Corn Belt and central plains, with readings there running as much as 10 to 15 degrees below normal. The cool down is not going to be lasting for long, though. Looking at temperature anomalies as we get towards June 27th, you can see that the European model by that time suggesting a quick return to temperatures easily above normal across a big portion of the nation's midsection by the time we get to the middle of next week. Now, looking at the 11 to 15 day period, there are some interesting developments this morning that I want to talk about. Let's first of all look at the 500 millibars in the early portion of the 11 to 15 day time frame. This will be for 1 o'clock in the morning on July 2nd. You can see that all of the models are in agreement at that we are looking at widespread above normal heights all across the nation during that time frame. So clearly not a cool weather pattern, and in fact temperatures at that time across much of the nation would be running easily above normal, if not much above normal levels. At that same time, I don't think that the rainfall chances would be shutting off. Look at where the dome of high pressure would be located on the European model at that time, and also on the Canadian model would be located more towards southern portion of the nation. I would think that disturbances moving over top of that dome of high pressure would keep a lot of the Corn Belt in ring of fire rain possibilities for at least early portions of the 11 to 15 day time frame. But what's interesting this morning is how much more emphatic the models are this morning on a strengthening of the ridge or even dome of high pressure for latter portions of the 11 to 15 day time frame. This is looking at 500 millibars for 1 o'clock in the afternoon on July 5th, or towards the very end of the 11 to 15 day time frame from the European ensemble. Note this morning how it has really strengthened its look of the ridge and dome of high pressure by that time frame. The 588 height line that is normally kind of the dividing line between relatively cooler air and big heat, well to the north of the Corn Belt. Note where the 591 line is. Even a area of 594 heights, center of a fairly impressive dome of high pressure at that time, indicated over Kansas by the European ensemble. And with the dome of high pressure or the ridge of high pressure being that strong, it'd be a situation where by that time any ring of fire range will be located well to the north of the Corn Belt. So bottom line, as far as the 11 to 15 day time frame this morning, clearly it's going to be a hot period in the Corn Belt. Should be plenty of highs in the 90s, and as I stated in the early portion of this video, if I'm wrong about my 11 to 15 day temperature forecast, I'm going too cool, and there very well could be some significant areas of much above normal temperatures in the 11 to 15 day time frame. I think that there would still be some rainfall chances via ring of fire action in the Corn Belt in early portion of the 11 to 15 day period, but models are in agreement this morning that we probably would see that rainfall activity shutting off as the ridge and dome of high pressure really strengthens for late in the 11 to 15 day period, taking any rainfall activity well to the north of the Corn Belt by late in the 11 to 15 day time frame. Internationally this morning, some modest changes in the forecast over in Europe and the former Soviet Union. Note that western portion of Europe looking at below normal rainfall for the next 2 weeks. Still a situation where France is looking at largely nothing in the way of rainfall for the next 10 days. Forecast has gone wetter in Eastern Europe and areas to the south of there. Note that Poland and especially areas south of there will be looking at a nice rainfall amounts during the next 2 weeks. That would be especially beneficial rainfall for Poland. Also have seen the forecast go a little bit wetter for the winter grain and summer row crop areas of the former Soviet Union. You can see that a bigger portion of the area is now in normal to above normal rainfall during the next 2 weeks. Although still note that it is still looking to be western portion of Ukraine and areas to the north of there that is looking at the most significant rainfall during the 2 week time frame. So in general, just a modestly wetter forecast for the winter grain and summer row crop areas of the former Soviet Union today, but still looking at your very best range favoring western portions of that region. No change for the spring wheat grain areas of the former Soviet Union, still looking at extensive and locally heavy rains there over the next 2 weeks. No changes in China, well above normal rainfall across most of the Chinese corn and soybean areas during the next 2 weeks. Most of the rain in Manchuria for the 6 to 10 and 11 to 15 day time frames, and that will also be the case for northern portions of the North China Plain. For the Canadian prairies, no rain going to be seen there for the next 2 days. Then some rains returning there for the weekend through the 6 to 10 day time frame. Looks like fairly minimal rains for Manitoba, but some nice amounts over the course of the period from Saturday through the end of the 2 week time of the 10-day time frame for Saskatchewan and also into Alberta. A very confusing forecast this morning with Australia. A lot of the models are indicating some rainfall chances, but no real agreement on exactly when or where they may occur. A European model there on the right note that it has some nice rains in especially the 6 to 10 day time frame in western growing areas, not much in the east. GFS model on the other hand, not a whole lot in the west, but some nice rains in northeastern portion of New South Wales. It is not a high confidence forecast this morning, but in general, I'm disagreeing with both of these models and thinking that any rainfall that is seen for the next 10 days in both Western Australia and in the eastern growing areas is more limited than either of these models would suggest. Not a high confidence forecast, but I'm not convinced this morning that either the western or eastern wheat growing areas of Australia will be seeing appreciable rainfall for the next 10 days, but it is certainly a forecast that is subject to change. Finally, this morning over in India, looks like some nice monsoonal activity for the next 10 days anyway. Some signs today, though, that the monsoon may weaken again in the 11 to 15 day time frame. That's what I have for your Thursday. Everyone have themselves a great day.